we're going to get started. Let me kind of quiz the crowd a little bit. Who's growing ginger or turmeric right now? We've got a few? A few, okay. And the rest of you are interested? Very good. All right. Well, you got a packet. Let's look through here real quick. We kind of got a schedule for the next little bit of time that we're going to be together in here. We're going to do some presentations in here, about 4, and you can see them on here. We're going to then we're going to go out to the field. We're going to take these trolleys, go out to the field, and look at the high tunnels out there, look at the ginger production, and talk out there some. How does that sound? We've got within this packet that Molly Klein has put together for us. Thanks, Molly. We've got some of the presentations, some fact sheets. We've got fresh ginger cake with candied citrus glaze, some recipe cards. There might be different ones on the back. Ginger lemonade, different ones in maybe different packets. And then we've got an evaluation, a questionnaire. If you could fill that out for us at the end. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started because we are running a little bit behind. Dr. Rafie and I are going to kind of start with the first presentation, and I'm just going to say a few words and let him continue with that. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about is I work a lot with protected culture greenhouses, high tunnels. And so when we talk about ginger and turmeric, we're talking about growing those crops in Virginia. We're talking about growing those crops in some type of protected culture, so some type of greenhouse or high tunnel. And what we do mostly are, let's see, Dr. Jackson, will you turn those lights? Is that better? Okay. Yep. You okay?
Kind of reflecting on my glasses.
One more? One more? One. Is that okay? Okay. So we kind of have to kind of preface all the ginger and turmeric talk with how we're growing it in a high tunnel structure, because ginger might take 10 months to grow, but we don't have that much time in Virginia. And so one of the ways we do that, high tunnels extend the growing season. That's what we're talking about. Is everybody familiar with this term, high tunnel? And very basically, it's resembles a conventional greenhouse. You can think of it as an unheated greenhouse structure, right? No active heating and cooling systems, and we'll talk about them a lot out there. But no active and no fans, no heaters in there. We do have roll-down curtains, drop-down curtains to ventilate them. But you can see some pictures here of different ones. Most of the ones we're talking about are these type that you see in that top picture. You know, a single bay structure like these. This is a multi-bay. Probably not as much ginger production. We're mostly talking about these type. So whether you're growing tomatoes, raspberries, or ginger or turmeric, we're talking about extending that growing season with this structure. With a lot of things, we see increased yields, but we also see the ability to be early and the ability to go on into the fall with our crops. You know, we're gonna see more of this out there, but this is an example of some ginger in containers, and then further covered. This would be plants probably in December or so that we're covering up for seed for next season. So we're further protecting that into January so that we can have that mature ginger for the next season. And you can see what it looks like at that time of the year. Within a tunnel, there's this further added protection to keep that going on through the colder months that we have here. All right. So just a real quick couple words introduction about tunnels, but we'll be out there. We can talk more about that out there. Now I'm going to see if Dr. Rafie would come on up and talk a little bit more about the actual production and growing. Sorry, Mike.
Good morning. Yeah, let's see. That was interesting because when Dr. Jackson or Chris asked you how many of you are growing ginger, so not many of you showed your hand, but that's very good. But I hope those, because I know there are quite a bit of interest, pay a little bit attention to some of the numbers that Mr. Cox is going to share with you. Ginger is still hot, but it's one of those things, as everything else in the market, it all depends on the supply and demand. But you may pay attention, study if you are planning to start growing ginger and turmeric in the future. But ginger is actually produced what we call propagated vegetatively. We don't plant seed. All you need to do is to plant a small piece of ginger. But I have traveled to Hawaii, which is the heaven for ginger, growing ginger. I used to work in Central America, and I visited Caribbean. So I've been around a little bit, watching the ginger industry going ups and downs. It's very vulnerable when it comes to the production of ginger. And it's vulnerable because it's the seeds or the seed pieces or the rhizome pieces of rhizome that we produce, we start our production, if it's not clean, you're in trouble. And it takes a little bit of time before you really, it brings you down. So and you will be very disappointed if you don't really understand and pay attention to the seed piece that you're planting. There are lots of ginger that comes available in the market. They are very, they look good, but if you plant them, they collapse because of bacterial, fungal diseases that I'll mention. But you really, really need to, the secret of success, and that has happened all over the world, is all depend on the seed, that seed piece. So what I would do, we start in our program, and this is what we are trying to promote. We want to make sure that the grower pay detailed attention to their growing their own seeds. Still, the process is a little bit lengthy, as I will describe in my presentation, but pay attention to your seed, or seed pieces, that pieces of ginger. That is the secret of success. This is a series of suggestions by Hopperly from University of Hawaii, because there is a tradition in Hawaii, growing ginger in Hawaii, because literally they have the perfect condition. You want to make sure you only use mature pieces of ginger, because what you see in the market, they are not mature. They are what we call baby ginger. Baby ginger is nothing but immature ginger. So you want to make sure that you plant pieces of ginger which is mature, clean, disease-free, what we call hands, small pieces. But sometimes, as I said, it's kind of tricky, and it requires quite a bit of experience. When you look at the ginger, it's clean, but unfortunately, it may be infected by bacteria or fungal diseases. So we usually plant or select a piece which has 2 to 4 ounces. We don't want it too small or too large. We want to make sure it has at least 2 eyes. Many of you are familiar with the planting potato. That same thing. We'll show it to you when we go to the tunnel. We want to make sure that it has at least 2 eyes on that pieces of seed piece that we plant. We want to make sure we do quite a bit of cutting, because when you go to market, your supermarket, when you receive the ginger seed, they come in big hands, big pieces. So what you need to do, you cut them. And the knife that you use, if you use your knife with a piece which is infected with fungal diseases or bacteria, here you go. You infect everything else as you go. So you want to make sure you disinfect that knives every time you do cutting. So that is, and then usually after you do the cutting of the pieces, you want to make sure you cure it by dropping it in bleach or household bleach. That is something that we prepare and just disinfect ginger. And then, but the cutting, actually, what's really interesting about the ginger, it cures itself. It dries out, that cutting, within 24 hours to 48 hours. So just be careful. Really, the secret of your future success is all depend on the seeds. Pay detailed attention to the seed. These are mature ginger that we allowed it to grow all the way to December. Chris Mullins was talking about letting it go beyond baby ginger to mature itself. And this is the pieces of ginger that David Donaway, and he's sitting in the back, and Charles Hill, Mr. Charles Hill, they work and they plant and they cure and they keep it really in good condition, so it doesn't get infected with the bacteria. And the environment that you keep your seed is very, very important. How do we grow it? A piece of ginger, again, assuming that is disease-free and clean and fresh, mature, we put it in a 1-gallon pot We do that in January. We prepare a pot January or February. Sometimes I prefer to do it in January. We plant it in 1 gallon pot, and then we fill it. That medium, the soil medium, has compost and sphagnum peat moss and perlite and other things that we mix it. There's a mixture that we buy, a Fafford mixture. Commercially, we buy it. We buy it and fill those 1 gallon pot 3/4. I fill it up all the way so I could take a picture. You plant that seed piece and you cover it 2 inches of soil. You cover it with 2 inches. You don't plant it too deep. And that thing doesn't germinate or doesn't sprout. Just water it a little bit and let it stay there for 4 or 5 weeks. And watch it, go in there and remove the soil, put it out, and see if it's sprouting or not. Eventually it will sprout if it's a good seed. And then what you see, that is what we have in April. These are the pots that we'll get in April. So these are ready to go to the high tunnel. Chris mentioned the high tunnel. So there are 2 ways that you can grow this. One way is if you want to set it up, you don't want to be worried about weed control, clean, you plant them in the pot. Our experience with the pot was not very successful because I think Mr. Cox is going to share with you his experience with different type. The hard plastic pot that we started growing it wasn't very successful for us. So, but the advantage is you have total control over what you want to do with it. We had 4 years ago, when we grew it, we started getting probably 3 to 4 pounds of ginger from potted plant. But planting it in the high tunnel is a different story. Yeah. This is how we do it. There's a fact sheet in your package that talks about this a little bit detailed. But this is how you do. You till the ground, and then you use the tiller to make a furrow. This is what a furrow or a ditch. You just use your tiller to do that. And then this is how we do it. There are other people, we are just telling you the way we do it, and it's been quite successful. And this is actually one of our growers. And then we buy quite a load of mushroom compost. And in those furrow or in that ditch, we put 2 inches of mushroom compost. And the place that I want to plant my, let's see how this works. The place that I want to plant my plant in that row is right here. Those are, I add triple superphosphate. This is a practice that they've done, successful growers have done in other parts of the world. I put handful, not too much, handful in that area where I want to transplant my 1 gallon potted ginger. And then I cover that with a little bit of more mushroom compost. And I don't do anything but to take my 1 gallon pot and plant them in that row and cover them. Cover them with with soil. We usually do it with soil. And this is mushroom compost that I have. And this is what you see. It says we do this in April, depending on the condition, or May. You don't want to go beyond May. You want to make sure you plant them. And then you see because of the plant is actually a 1 gallon plant. When you put them and you cover them, it just become at the same level of the soil. So, and then we set up drip irrigation. Chris probably will show you in there. We set up drip irrigation, and that's the route we go. I usually add a little bit of 10-10-10 fertilizer. Or if you're organic, or if you'd like to go, there are many options that you can use with fertilizer. This is in May, not right after planting, and this is in August. The plant starts growing. Let's see. This is. Let's see. This is in one of our growers, Mr. Charles Maloney, in September. So, fertilizer. Here's the secret. There's actually that publication. It's in that whole package that you have. The principle of this is ginger is a heavy feeder. You really, if you want big hands or rhizome, you really need to feed it. And the way we do it at the beginning of the season, from May all the way to July, we feed them with nitrogen, sources of nitrogen, different sources of nitrogen. And then from July on, we feed them potassium, because from July on is the time that rhizome, underground rhizome, starts forming. We feed them quite a bit of potassium to help those glands. But it's a heavy feeder. Again, as I said, for us, when extension specialists, when we stand up for our growers, we always say, do a soil test to see the condition of the soil. But definitely that is something that I'm assuming that many of you would do. But you really need heavy feeder. If you want big ginger, feed it. But obviously you don't want to overfeed it. So there is a good amount of information in that website from Hawaii telling you detail what you need to do. But the principle of it is, at the beginning, feed it with nitrogen, sources of nitrogen, and from July on, feed it sources of potassium for that rhizome development, okay? Here's the trick about ginger. The ginger it needs mounding or healing, and it is the periodic covering of the upward expanding. This is the word that I was trying to remember. Upward expanding of the rhizome. So on the other hand, when it develops, the rhizome comes out of the soil. So it requires absolutely 3 or 4 times during the production season, you need to go in there, add soil or compost or whatever we prepare. Mr. Hill, Charles Hill, does it with compost, more compost. He adds more compost in there. Now, here's the trick. If you don't, this is the picture that are beginning to come out. And if you don't, you see that greenness, it turns green, become like the stem if you don't cover them. And therefore, it's not going to be marketable. So you are required to pay attention. Go in there, check plant by plant to make sure you open it up from the top. Look down, you'll see the rhizome are up, and you need to cover them with soil, okay? This is baby ginger that we regularly are harvesting, and you'll see it as we go to the high tunnel. Now, here is the thing that you really, if you're a serious grower, you really need to do this. You need to start growing your own sources of seeds, because what we do during the production season, I go in there and I identify the plant that look good, doesn't have any diseases. Because if a plant has disease, it shows it on the foliage part. You could see some of the stems are drying out, some of the stems are yellowing, falling down. I discard any time I see a plant that I have marked, from the beginning with the symptom of disease, I discard it. That's not going to be my seed. I continue that process, hoping that toward the end, I would have a few plants, depending on my needs, that would be the sources of my rhizome. So those need to be left alone, continued until they mature. On the other hand, August and September, I'm not going to pull them out because they are baby ginger. They need to stay there to mature. And then how do we do it? There are different ways. One way is inside the high tunnel. Chris showed you, has a better picture in his presentation. This is my tunnel. I make another tunnel, a second tunnel, because that allows me to protect it another 3-4 degree temperature when it's 31 degree out there. So you protect it. Sometimes it goes really, really cold. I need to protect that. In December, I go in there and put another heater in there to be able to do everything possible to protect my sources of seed. Now, 2 years ago, I was in the opinion that they really need to go until January. Charles Hill proved me wrong last year. By probably end of November, he pulled those plants out and said, I'm going to plant this. And he was successful. And then I showed you this picture that I had in here. This picture, what you see in here in this, these are the ginger. Mature ginger, in my opinion, was not. But he insisted, and he said, well, man, this look mature. Let's go with it. So we took our risk, and we have beautiful ginger. On the other hand, by end of November, you may be able to get some mature ginger. But when you look at this, you hardly see any those are symptom of baby ginger, that pink reddish color that I showed you. Let me see if I can show it to you. You see those pink reddish color? That tells me they are not mature. But the previous picture that I showed you, those are symptoms. Those are mature ginger. We are comfortable under our condition to go with it in end of November. So on the other hand, that's a really good news for growers. You may actually do not need the heater, second tunnel, all of those. So that depending on where you have your production. Okay? But anyway, so that's the time that we go in there, put it out, and take it to the wash it, clean it, and then start handing it or dehanding it and setting it up for production. So all of these things that you need to start planting your ginger in when? No later than February, because it takes probably 5-6 weeks sometimes before it sprouts. So you have those plants ready to go not later than May. Why? Because ginger is photoperiod sensitive. So they like the development of the foliage to occur during the long days. So if you start planting your seeds in July, the foliage development would happen in September and October, which is short days, and you'll be disappointed. So that's the secret, okay? Let me see if I can. And that's what you have, baby ginger and mature ginger. So those are the things that you really need to pay quite a bit of attention, okay? Problem with ginger. We are beginning, because ginger is a new crop in here in the US, in the temperate zone. So we have not seen lots of diseases and problem as a result of soil and condition and so on. But there is a cutworm, armyworm. What we notice, they actually go in there and lay eggs on the stem, on the lower part of the stem, and the larvae dig inside the stem, and they cut the stem. Actually, we haven't seen it that many, but you got to pay attention to that. You see that cut in there, and there's the spot, the tunnel, the larvae goes in there, and then what will happen? Here's what we are worried about, because when that happens, that whole rhizome or the plant become very vulnerable to bacteria and fungal disease to get in. So we haven't seen lots of damage because of the cutworm. What we are worried about is the consequences as a result of that opening of the rhizome. So that is, you need to pay attention to that. One of the problems that is beginning to occur again is the leaf spot, Phylosticta. It's a huge problem in ginger growing country, in the tropics. Phylosticta or leaf spot is a huge problem. We are beginning to see it, and it seems like it's getting more severe as we go on. Now, it's not economically significant, the damage, so you don't need to get out there and spray and spray and spray. So, but keep your eyes open, and then that drawing, you see those spots at the beginning, and as it goes on, it starts drawing out and making holes in that. So, as I said, not significant at the moment, but be aware of that, particularly if it develops at the earliest stages of the plant. You really need to pay attention to it. But also what we have learned, this is actually a piece of research that has been done in other countries, having it under 30% shade, it would reduces the severity of leaf spot. So that is a piece of information that you may want to take note of. Diseases, bacterial wilt, bacterial soft rot, Irvinia, and Pseudomonas are two of the really problematic bacterial diseases that the ginger has. And then the way to see that, if you pull out your ginger after they collapse, pull it out, there is this terrible smell of the rhizome. So if you smell that, you could see that that is because of the bacteria. And then Fusarium and Pythium are also fungal diseases that you'll see. But again, all of this, they come with seeds. But now the problem is this, because many of you are going to start planting in the tunnel. If you continue planting in the same tunnel over and over again, you're inviting trouble. So like everything else, it needs to be what? rotate it. Yeah. Now, at least 3 years. But that means you probably need to have 3 high tunnels if you want to go big. Or you may really want to consider dividing your tunnel in 3 sections. Plant 1 section with ginger and then the other 2 with different things. And just, you need to be creative. And that's the issue that we have. We've got quite a few number of tunnels that we could rotate among them. But just be aware. Let's finish, and then I think Chris suggested for the question to be, because we've got plenty of material to cover. So, but anyway, so be aware of that. And that's rhizome rot, fusarium. It's a huge problem. They come with bad seeds. Bad seeds, you invite trouble. So be very aware of your seed. Study and do your homework with good sources of seed. And then when you get hold of good sources of seed, make sure you become your own seed producer. Don't rely. They're very expensive. And Mr. Cox will tell you it's really hard to get good seed. And then when you get it, you actually don't know what you're getting. Here's a study that we've done, a piece of research that one of our students did we kind of wanted, because 2 years ago I was claiming and saying, no, we can't grow ginger in the field. And I said, why not? Let's try it. But we did. Actually, one of our students did a research in the field with the same thing. We had our 1 gallon plant. We plant them in the field, and then we plant them in the tunnel. So what's really interesting, if you want to grow ginger and you don't have a high tunnel, you don't have the resources, yes, it can be done. But here's the situation. These are the plots of ginger that we harvested. The blue is the weight per plant for those plants that were grown in the field. So they were 2 pounds. And then in that same comparison, it was 8 pounds. So the difference between field and it really, really significant. That's what you see. This is the graph. The mean of the tunnel was probably, I would say, 5 pounds in comparison to probably 2 pounds. So that's the average. So if you want to do it, grow in the field, yes, you can. I wouldn't have said this 3 years ago. Okay, this is the result of this year. This is Mr. David Dunaway. He's actually collecting this data. This is weight of high tunnel per plant. It is absolutely amazing what you can do if you feed it, you take care of it. I have, ladies and gentlemen, I have a plant we harvested in 11.5, and the weight of that plant was 12 pounds of marketable ginger. It is, yeah, you need to congratulate David Dunaway and his team, Mr. Charles Hill. They do a great job taking care of it. It has extraordinary potential for wonderful quality of ginger. Okay? Turmeric is a rhizomous herbaceous perennial also that we treated as annual. It's from the ginger family, and it's native to Southeast Asia. It is one of the crop that has significant in medicinal and spice world in Southeast Asia, and then. But it requires, again, 9 to 10 months to grow it under our condition. The same technique that we use for ginger, it's applied to turmeric. Good pieces of seed, like a good farmer that I am. I go around and I always have a piece of turmeric. It doesn't have to be big, but you want to make sure it's clean. It's relatively new because there are lots of excited. I'm sure other speakers are going to talk about this. It's not problematic in terms of fungal and bacterial diseases in turmeric. Either we haven't been growing them much, it hasn't been propagated repeatedly, or really by their genetic makeup, they are not as vulnerable as ginger is. But we haven't had a major issue with them for the last several years that we've been growing it. As I said, Dr. Nartea are going to talk about the market part of it and so on. But there are lots and lots of excitement about ginger. And then as we go in there, it's a beautiful, beautiful ornamental plant. Every time I walk in there, Mr. Dunaway, our technician, reminds me, look at that plant. Isn't that wonderful? Obviously, it has some landscaping background and so on. But it is, by all means, it's a beautiful, beautiful plant. So, and that is a mature pieces of turmeric. And this is Mr. Charles Hill growing, harvesting, and so on. So has lots and lots of potential. We are beginning to take some yield of take some data, because I'm sure many of you would be interested to have some data shared with you. But definitely, hopefully soon we're going to have the publication for turmeric with some data presented to you. Okay? That's it. I'm going to be around if you have questions. I'll be glad to answer.